Hey everybody, welcome to the Orange and Brown Talk podcast here on a Monday, recording this around 5:30. Dan Labbe, Mary Kay Cabot, a Hey Mary Kay edition of the pod a day after the Browns lose to the Jets 27-20. All of these questions coming from our Football Insider subscribers. Mary Kay and I back from New York. Got back earlier today. We've heard from Kevin Stefanski, heard from Ronnie Hickman, heard from Ethan Posick. No major changes coming for the Cleveland Browns. No small changes, at least that we know of, coming for the Cleveland Browns at this point. But we're going to start here because obviously there was some big NFL news today, and it got some Browns fans thinking. Brian Daboll was fired by the Giants. And so we'll start here. Dash in Raleigh, North Carolina. Hey, Mary Kay. With NFL coaches starting to get fired and Brian Daboll at the top of the list, of course, Brian Callahan has been fired. Who am I forgetting? Somebody else has been fired too. But with these coaches getting fired, what is the thinking in Berea about Kevin Stefanski's status?
Well, I think Kevin Stefanski is 100% totally safe. I think that Jimmy Haslam indicated even at the NFL annual meeting that Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski were going to be breaking in rookie quarterbacks this year. And this was not the season in which they were going to have their feet held to the fire. So I really don't think Kevin's in any trouble right now. Maybe they'll reevaluate after the season and see how they want to handle things. But right now, I think he's okay. I know he's okay for the rest of the season. I really, truly believe that they're going to maintain the status quo. But the thing that I just wrote about is the fact that these are the three quarterbacks that have had, the three coaches that have had rookie quarterbacks this season to deal with, right? So Brian Callahan had number 1 overall pick Cam Ward. He's 1-8 right now. And then Brian Daboll had number 25 overall pick, number 23 overall pick, Jackson Dart. And he is 2-5 right now, I think it is. And then, of course, Kevin Stefanski has Dillon Gabriel, who is 1-4. So it's tough to develop these young quarterbacks. A lot of times it's an occupational hazard and a coach doesn't survive it. But a lot of times also when you're starting a rookie quarterback, there are other problems and issues on the football team to go along with it. But suffice it to say that it requires a lot of patience and it requires a lot of fortitude to break in a rookie quarterback in most cases. And sometimes the coach doesn't survive it.
Yeah, and I think, too, with a lot of those cases, Cam Ward is an exception to this, but like Jackson Dart, I think they ended up going to him earlier than people expected. Dillon Gabriel, same deal. Nobody expected Dillon Gabriel to be starting by week 4, but here we are. And when you kind of go through some of these young quarterbacks in the league, you want to talk about a guy like Caleb Williams, right? He was the number 1 overall pick. The coach that was his coach got fired. Trevor Lawrence he's on his 3rd coach now. Urban Meyer was his first coach. He got fired pretty quickly, during the season. We see this, Drake May, not all of these were number 1 guys, but some of these were obviously 1st round guys. Drake May, his first coach is fired, and now he's got Mike Vrabel and Josh McDaniels, running things on offense for him. So we're seeing this more and more where teams are taking quarterbacks and they're willing to move on from coaches. It's not always the coach is tied at the hip to the quarterback. A lot of times it is, can you come in and fix this guy? That's sort of what the Browns did with Kevin Stefanski. Can you come in and fix Baker Mayfield? And then, of course, that fell apart. So it's just really hard sometimes to try and marry the coach and the quarterback, because sometimes it feels like you have we're going to bring in this coach, he's going to draft this quarterback, and then the coach gets fired. It's just hard. It's hard to figure out that combination. I think that's what we're learning.
It is hard to figure out that combination. And I think it is probably hard for teams to try to figure out, okay, is the coach struggling or is the quarterback, just not good enough and you have to give it more time? It's really hard to tell in some cases how to handle these situations. And I really don't envy the teams that have to try to figure it out, because you don't want to pull the plug on a coach quarterback combo too early. By the same token, you want to make sure that you're giving your quarterback every chance to succeed. So we'll have to see. Now, the Browns, we know what they did. They made the change in play calling. So we'll see the impact that's going to have over the next couple of weeks on Dillon Gabriel. I think actually the play calling was pretty creative and pretty good yesterday. It was different. I thought it really brought out a better side to Dillon Gabriel, but lo and behold, it wasn't the best defense in the world that they were playing either. So, it's too small a sample size, and I think everyone needs to see more.
Yeah, so going back to Kevin and kind of the bigger picture with him, and this is all kind of tied to what they do at quarterback too. You've got to make sure you've got the guy that you trust when you go into this offseason, and pick your quarterback, whether it's in the draft or if somebody comes available in free agency all of a sudden that they didn't expect, or is available in a trade. However they decide to approach this ultimately, you've got to make sure you have that right guy in place when you make that decision. I think for me personally, a loss like Sunday's, and I have to wonder if the folks in Berea feel this way too. Like when you lose to the Ravens in week 2, obviously you didn't look good. There were issues, but that was the Baltimore Ravens when they were healthy, and we're seeing that now that they're healthy again, they're getting back into this thing. You lose to the Lions on the road. You can kind of look at those and say, okay, look, the Lions are a Super Bowl contender. We know where we are. Let's not worry too much about that. To me, when you lose a game to the Jets, and in the fashion they lost that game, where Justin Fields completed 6 passes, and you had on the final drive, you had a pass interference, a holding call on a play where he clearly wasn't going to throw the ball, and then somebody jumped off sides on a play when they clearly weren't going to snap the ball. They give up. I mean, this offensive line is a mess right now. A loss like that, to me, that has to shake people a little bit. That has to at least wait a minute, what's going on here? We can't even beat the Jets the week that they had a fire sale. That's when you start to wonder, are some folks in that building starting to think maybe a change is more possible than it felt like a few weeks ago?
Well, you definitely want a football team that's playing smart football, and I think it shows that they're extremely well coached when they're playing smart football. And if you're not playing smart football, then you have to go back to the drawing board to make sure that those little details are being covered at all times. But I mean, I think we could see that Kevin was yelling at his defenders not to jump on that 4th and 5. But I mean, there are certain things that you just have to know too as a player. But I think when you're playing sloppy football and you're giving up touchdowns on special teams and you're jumping off sides on 4th and 5, that's all going to fall on your head coach. That is all going to fall on your head coach. And you are going to need to see some things from him over the next 8 games that this football team is playing sound, smart football. And then they're not making all these mental errors and all of these other mistakes. There's too many pre-snap penalties. There's too many dropped passes. The mental errors that we talked about on that final drive. It's just not the kind of football that you would expect. I don't expect this kind of football from a Kevin Stefanski coached team. I mean, he's a disciplined guy. So I don't know if it's just some of the personnel isn't up to the task right now or what the case may be, but this is not what you want to see from the Cleveland Browns right now.
Yeah, and I think that's, and I think another piece of this is the idea that, Kevin does tend to stick to the status quo with things, right? So obviously he did change play callers. 2nd year in a row he's changed play callers, which is strange. I do wonder how many offensive coaches we've seen do that 2 years in a row and still maintain their jobs. But he at least did that. But look, they're coming off this game. The special teams have been bad all year, and he threw his support behind Bubba Ventrone today. I don't know what they're going to do with Cam Thomas. I don't know if his role is going to change. We also don't know the status of Alex Wright. He left that game on Sunday with a quad injury, so that could maybe dictate Cam Thomas's role a little bit on the defense. But kind of what happens there? Does he see a lesser role? Do they decide to move on from him? I don't know, because they do have some edge rushers on the practice squad as well, including a veteran. I think Julian Okwara is still over there. They've got some guys they could bring up if they wanted to. So I think some of it too is Kevin is so sort of tied to the status quo in a lot of ways. He doesn't like to make knee-jerk reactions. And one of your cats has an opinion on this, it appears. He doesn't like to make knee-jerk reactions. So it's harder, I guess, to pass off some of the blame when some of these mistakes keep happening over and over again.
Yes, absolutely. 100%. And yes, I have to do cat removal.
We've got a cat walking in front of the screen.
Sorry about that. You never know what you're going to get on the Orange and Brown Talk pod.
True.
Okay, so Repeat the question, Dan.
So I was just saying, like, because Kevin is so, he doesn't make knee-jerk reactions, which I think is one of his strong suits, but also it puts him in a position where it's like, okay, the special teams over and over again keep making these mistakes. It's harder to just say, well, that's Bubba Ventrone. Like, because Kevin is so, he's so averse to making super fast changes. I mean, I'd be shocked if he fired a coordinator or coach mid-season. Like, it sort of falls on him too, right? Because he's not going to make those extreme changes. He's not going to have those knee-jerk reactions. And because of that, if mistakes keep happening, that kind of falls on him.
Right. And, this is an organization that really doesn't like to make those kinds of changes in the middle of the season. Now, we saw that the Raiders parted ways with their special teams coach just on Friday after a series of gaffes and mistakes. So it does happen throughout the league, but I don't see it happening here, especially not with Kevin coming out and giving Bubba that vote of confidence today, which that's what people wanted to know. People wanted to know what he thought about Bubba and what might happen there. And it's really unfortunate because Bubba is a really good special teams coach. The players rave about him. The other coaches rave about him. He came here with a great reputation. And for one reason or another, it just hasn't been working out as well as anybody had hoped. So we'll have to see what happens with that after the season. But I don't see anything changing mid-season. And I don't know. I just don't think that the Browns believe that something like that would help them at this point. They're 2-7. They've got the Ravens coming into town. They need continuity. They need stability. They don't need things to kind of go haywire right now. And I think they just want things to settle down.
So, of course, another one of those decisions that Kevin is sticking with is Dillon Gabriel remaining as his starting quarterback. As you can imagine, that came up in these questions, and you reiterated when you put your call out. You put a column up Sunday night, and you reiterated today when you put your call out to our subscribers that you think sticking with Dillon Gabriel is the right move. So this came from the 917 area code. Hey, Mary Kay, I respectfully disagree that the Browns need to see more of Dillon Gabriel. Whether 5 starts or 50, it's pretty obvious he doesn't have NFL starter level skills. A handful of more starts won't raise his physical limitations or ceiling sufficiently. Who knows if Shedeur Sanders will be better, but it's time to find out. So that was more of a statement than a question, but it leads, of course, into, that's sort of the line here. Some folks agree, like, hey, give Dillon more time. Other folks are ready to see Shedeur Sanders. You've made the case that you think sticking with Dillon Gabriel is the right move. When do you think this change occurs, though, if Dillon continues to struggle? Are we at a point where it's like Sunday might be it? Or do you think the leash is even longer than that?
I think the leash might be a little bit longer than that, at least. And the reason why I say that is because he's only had one game with Tommy Rees as his play caller now. And Tommy is bringing a new vibe to the table for Dillon Gabriel. He has him doing some different things. He's moving the pocket. We saw that Dillon Gabriel actually pulled it in and ran a number of times yesterday, and he gained some nice yards, albeit, again, of course, not a great run defense. But he did gain on that last field goal drive, 19 yards, 15 yards. He got some nice chunk plays there that way. And I think that's the good thing about Dillon Gabriel is that you can move him around a lot in this offense. That's what they like to do. Tommy Rees's offense is predicated on a lot of quarterback movement. And that's what you want in the NFL these days. That's what everybody is seeking and looking for the most part. The days of that classic drop back passer, I'm not going to say they're completely over, but they are waning significantly because now people want to have a quarterback that can stress a defense in multiple ways. And we've all seen it. We know what it can do to a defense. We know how difficult it can be. And basically everybody wants that. And I think that's one of the reasons why I hesitate a little bit with throwing Shedeur Sanders in there right now is because he's not that mobile quarterback. And this offense isn't necessarily suited to him. I mean, they would have to kind of switch things up for him a little bit because he's not somebody that you're going to design runs for and necessarily have him on the move all of the time. So that'll be interesting to see. But I do think that Dillon deserves a few more opportunities to work with Tommy Rees and see what he can do. The other thing about Dillon Gabriel is the fact that he hasn't always had the best performance by his supporting cast right now. There are still dropped passes. There are pre-snap penalties. The offensive line or the protection in general has not held up very well. And 6 sacks, that's too much. That's the second time this season he's been sacked 6 times. If that's happening with Dillon Gabriel, then I have to wonder what might happen with Shedeur Sanders if he's in there right now when the offensive line isn't necessarily, or the protection isn't necessarily what it needs to be. So people wonder, can it get any worse? It could possibly get worse if Sanders can't get away from trouble the way Dillon can. So we'll have to see how all that goes. But I think there is plenty of time to see what Shedeur Sanders can do. There are still 8 games left. Why would you give your 3rd round pick only 5 starts and you're going to give your 5th round pick 8 starts? Does that make any kind of sense? No. Just because people are going by what they remember seeing Shedeur do in college, they see the excitement, they see some things about him. He's got the name, he's got the star power, he's got the pizzazz, but it just doesn't make sense that you would only give your 3rd round pick 5 starts and then give Shedeur Sanders this long runway with 8 starts. A rookie quarterback needs to develop. It requires some patience. It requires some time, some seasoning, and it does require a good supporting cast and a good performance out of your supporting cast. So I'd like to see more of Dillon with Tommy and see if Tommy can't kind of raise the level of people around Dillon as well.
Yeah, and I think the reality with Dillon Gabriel is that's the type of quarterback if he's going to be successful in the league, it's going to be because of the pieces and parts around him. He's not going to be a guy necessarily that elevates people, but the hope is he can run an offense. Now the problem is he's missing a lot. He's just missing things, right? I mean, the Malachi Corley miss yesterday. I mean, that I don't know if that would have been a touchdown. That would have been a huge play. They had it blocked up. And we've seen how fast he is when the ball is in his hands. Like, you can't miss that throw. The 4th down, I've seen some screenshots of it. I try to be really careful with screenshot Twitter when it comes to film, but that's a play where you can't take that sack. And I feel like that ball probably has to come out a little quicker. And so those are the things with Dillon. It's like, he just doesn't have the wiggle room to miss on some of these things. He doesn't have the room for error that somebody else that, a Drake May, for example, might have, or someone like that. He's got to hit on the plays that are there. And I think that's been one of the problems too, along with everything else around him not being where it needs to be. When things have been right, he hasn't been doing enough with it. So this just goes back to the theme of the season. It's a little bit of everything. Whatever you want to criticize, and it's certainly Dillon is in that mix, have at it, because it's just been a little bit of everything on this offense.
Right. And when you look at all of the different drives, and we had a long night, a lot of travel today, so we haven't really rewatched the game yet, which I'm looking forward to doing that tomorrow, and I know you are too. But when you look at almost every single drive, there was either a sack on the drive. There were 6 sacks on 6 different drives. So on half of his drives, there was a sack. And generally, I don't know what the statistic is, but generally your chances of scoring a touchdown on a sack drive is not very good. On 2 of those 6 sack drives, they managed to put a field goal on the board, but generally a sack is going to wreck your drive for the most part. So there's either a sack, there was a dropped pass, there was a pre-snap penalty, an errant throw. I mean, you name it, it was always something. So they're not playing clean ball. It's not a well-oiled machine yet, but they kind of hit the reset button on the offense. And so they were not completely reinventing the wheel and starting all over again, but it's different under Tommy. So I think you need to be, again, a little bit patient and see what Tommy can bring to the table. Now that he's worked with Dillon for 1 game, I think that's going to be meaningful. I think he's got a lot to go back to the drawing board with and say, okay, here's what worked, here's what didn't. And the hard part about this one was the fact that it was Cedric Tillman's first game back after a 4-game absence with a pulled hamstring or a hamstring injury. And he's knocking off the rust, right? He's not 100%. He hasn't played with Dillon Gabriel before. They don't have any timing or chemistry down for the most part. And then you had Harold Fannin, who suffered a a hamstring injury during practice on Wednesday and completely missed Thursday and was limited on Friday. So he really wasn't in the flow of practice this week. And when you have almost no margin for error to get a play right, that's going to be tough, right? And these are rookies once again. You've got Dillon trying to throw to Harold, and it just was off on a number of things. It was off. And I think him missing practice and pulling that hamstring this week or injuring that hamstring this week, I don't think that help matters this week at all. They need time on task. They need practice. This is not 18-year veteran Joe Flacco who can just start slinging the ball to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, right? These guys need time. It was a new play caller, and they didn't have the continuity of everybody being in there together, trying to get their act together. So I think it needs a little more seasoning. It needs a little bit more time. And it amazes me, Dan, how everyone thinks that they're a Shedeur Sanders expert. Everybody thinks they know exactly what this guy is capable of doing in the NFL with complete 100% certainty and conviction. They know it. How do they know it? How do they know it, Dan?
Maybe they're in meetings. I don't know. Maybe there's like some secret stream of like quarterback room meetings that we don't know about or something. I don't know.
I mean, if the Browns thought that Shedeur Sanders was ready to go in there and play better than Dillon Gabriel and win football games for them, they would have him in the football game. Trust me, they would.
So, yeah, I mean, that's actually kind of where I wanted to go with this. Like, how much of this decision is about Dillon? Because obviously it hasn't been good enough. And to your point, like one of the problems is you're at a point in the season where it's just not going to be like, you're just not going to have all the healthy bodies you need. And that just makes it that much harder for everybody when they're rookies, when they're not Joe Flacco. But how much of this is Dillon, and how much of this is just the fact that like they aren't ready to put Shedeur out there yet? Like you said, if Shedeur was ready, or if they believed Shedeur was ready, you'd have to think they'd be considering it more than they are right now, because the season's not going anywhere. They're 2-7. Dillon has not looked very good. You've got a home game. Granted, it is against the Ravens, but you have a home game this week. There is an opportunity if they wanted to make that change. I just wonder how much of this is Dillon and how much of this is Shedeur, and the fact that they've kind of left themselves short in that room, that it's got to be one or the other.
I think it's a little bit of both, or some of both. I think it's two sides of the coin. I think it is, we want to develop Dillon Gabriel. We want to see more of him. And then the other side of the coin is, do we want to throw Shedeur Sanders in there with 8 games to go and run the risk of finding out that he needs a little bit more time to come up the learning curve before he is ready to deal with some of the things that are going to be coming at him lightning fast? So I think it's a little bit of both, or maybe a lot of both of those things. But here's another thing to consider. I was thinking about this earlier today. The Browns are going to draft a quarterback in the first round of the 2026 draft. I can almost say that with certainty. I don't know for sure, but I would think that that's why they have these 2 first-round picks, and the class seems good enough that you're going to need to spend one or both of your first-round picks to get that quarterback. So let's start from that premise. So let's say you're going to draft your potential franchise quarterback in 2026. You might not be ready to start that guy in the first game or the second game or the third game. Baker Mayfield didn't even start in week 1 in 2018. So I think this is an organization that recognizes that giving a rookie quarterback a little bit of time on the bench to see how this all works and to go through some game plan installation weeks before you get thrown in there is the way to go. And in that scenario, then you're going to need a starter for next year. And if they can give Dillon Gabriel plenty of starting experience this season, maybe he's the guy that can start the season for you next year while you wait for your rookie to be ready. And maybe that happens in week 3, and maybe it happens in week 4. But depending on where you take the guy, you might not want that to be in week 1. Therefore, you're going to need somebody to fill that gap for you. And I think they need to find out, can it be Dillon?
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is, just as you kind of play this out. So let's say it goes okay. Dillon goes out and plays Sunday against the Ravens, and it goes poorly, and he looks bad again. And then they decide to make that change. You've gotten 6 starts out of Dillon, and then you'll get what you hope would be 6 to 7 starts out of Shedeur Sanders, right? Or let's say it's 2 weeks from now. Then you get 7 starts out of Dillon Gabriel and 5 or 6 starts out of Shedeur. Maybe throw Deshaun Watson in there, as we've talked about, for a week or two. I don't know, but there's still plenty of runway for them to get a good sample size on Dillon Gabriel, which we're kind of reaching that maximum level where it's like, okay, now we got to see something for you to keep doing this, and also get a good sample size of Shedeur Sanders. And then on top of all that, if you're drafting a guy in the first round next year, especially if you're drafting a guy at like 1 or 2 or 3, it almost doesn't matter. Like, all this time you spend on these two quarterbacks doesn't mean a whole lot, because you're going to hand the keys to that guy sooner rather than later. So like, it matters because maybe, who knows, maybe Shedeur comes off the bench and he hits and it's like, oh my God, what were they doing? I can't believe they had this guy on the bench. Maybe that happens. And in that case, you're in great shape as an organization. But it really is kind of about what they do at quarterback in the draft, I think, at this point. And if what you think is going to happen happens and they take a guy that high in the draft, guess what? It kind of doesn't matter when Shedeur plays this season, because the keys are going to somebody else next year.
They really are. And this whole entire college football season, we know that the Browns have been crisscrossing the country, and Andrew Berry has been going to game after game after game to watch these quarterbacks. Every weekend, he's out on that road watching Lenoris and Fernando and Dante, you name it. He's out there watching these quarterbacks play in person, because we all know what they plan on doing with one or both of their first round picks. So somehow, some way, they are going to end up with a quarterback, I believe, in the first round next year. Now, I thought that was going to happen this year too, because I did think that, and that's what everybody was saying. That's what all the experts were saying, where there were 2 first round picks in Shedeur and Cam Ward, and that that he was worthy of that number 2 overall pick. We come to find out that that assessment was apparently inaccurate. We'll find out. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it wasn't inaccurate. But I can say with, like I said, with certainty that they're going to take a quarterback in the first round. So like you said, a lot of this doesn't matter. A lot of this doesn't matter because their quarterback has not ridden in on the white horse yet. That's happening in April. It's just really a matter of which one they're going to take and where they end up in that first round of the draft with these 2 picks.
Yeah, and just one last thing here. Just in saying that, I do think, like, I don't want to just write off the rest of this season and be like, it doesn't matter, everybody's safe, just, let's worry about draft position. I don't want to fall into that trap either. I do think that, this coaching staff, this team still needs to show some things. Again, especially when you play, I don't know what's going to happen Sunday. Division games are weird. We'll see. Not very confident in that football game. But you're going to go play the Raiders, right? That team's a mess. You've got the Titans coming to town. If this team loses, and I know people will argue draft position and all of that, but if this team looks like they did on Sunday against the Raiders and the Jets, and if they're just getting blown out, like, for as well as the Bears are playing, right? I would hope this team wouldn't get blown out by the Bears. But if it looks really bad, like, that to me is what matters more than anything. Like, it can't look like it did on Sunday. That was just a brutal, awful performance. Like, it can't look like that again. So that's kind of what matters to me, I guess. It's the optics.
Well, and you never know what an owner is thinking. Paul DePodesta just left the organization, so change is afoot. I mean, you can call it whatever you want it, but their chief strategy officer just left the building. Okay, he was at the game on Sunday, but he's gone. So you never know what's really going on in the mind of an owner. Nobody really has any idea. And even the people that might think they know might not know. Because if Jimmy's planning on major changes, which I have no indication that that's the case, but if he is going to be doing that, he's going to play that really, really close to the vest and not let on about anything like that until probably after the season, when he sits down with whoever, in the organization, that they'll sit down and figure out what they want to do. So we can't say for sure what's going to happen. We really don't know. We know that he values continuity and alignment, but we also know that he's impatient and that he wants to win. And he's been very patient with this crew. And I think he probably will continue to be. But we can't sit here and guarantee that everybody's coming back and that these guys are going to have this chance to pick this next quarterback and develop this next quarterback. We're not sure about that yet. So I do think that there is something to be said for everybody putting their best foot forward for these final 8 games.
And just don't forget that we've seen that stadium when it's empty in December if they're getting beat and it looks bad. And don't forget that they're trying to sell people on this Brook Park thing. And I know that that's way down the road and pretty much done, but like they're trying to sell people on PSLs and buying into Brook Park, and like that's part of this. Like there is a business side to this. It's more than just football, even if they don't want to admit that. So the last thing you want is to be losing to the Titans by 14 points on December 7th. Maybe my daughter will be marching in that game. I don't know. The vote hasn't happened yet, but you can go see a good marching band at least.
I hope so.
Yeah, you don't want that empty stadium losing to the Titans by 2 scores while you're trying to sell a huge vision in Brook Park and all of that. So as weird as it is, I think that's part of the math here too, that they've got to figure out. Okay, we're going to wrap things up there. Hey, Mary Kay edition of the podcast, Orange and Brown Talk. Find us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Find our YouTube, Cleveland Browns, on cleveland.com. If you're not a football insider, cleveland.com/Browns, the blue banner at the top of the page to get involved with that. Mary Kay, I'll talk to you later.
Sounds great.